Hi, Ryan Dotson here with SurvivalSullivan.com. Today we're going to talk a little bit about shelters and specifically lean-to shelters. When you're in a survival situation, you really want to be able to protect yourself from the elements as quickly as possible. And a simple lean-to is one of the best ways to do that. You can put up a lean-to literally in minutes if you have the right supplies. So we're going to show you how to build a primitive lean-to, but in addition to that, if you have anything with you that's waterproof, like an emergency blanket or a tarp, that is by far the best way to build a lean-to. That's going to block the wind, it's going to block the rain, it's going to make sure that you're going to not have to deal with hypothermia if the weather's cold or wet. So you basically just want to tie that to where it's at a 45-degree angle. You can stake down the two bottom corners with some sticks that you've sharpened, and then use cordage to tie the two top corners to tree branches or whatever that you have close by. You can put that up in a couple of minutes, and I've used those before. I've been through some pretty nasty storms and never really had an issue, so that really helps out if you have that with you. Now, if you don't, then you can still use natural materials to build a primitive shelter. What you would want to do is first establish a frame, and the frame is going to mainly consist of a ridge pole, which that's what you're going to lean all of your materials against at a 45-degree angle. So a ridge pole needs to be longer than your body length. I typically suggest about 10 feet long, and you can either rest that in the crotch of two trees, or if you can't find two trees that are the right distance apart that have that Y shape for you to rest it in, you can bury poles in the ground vertically and use those to tie onto the ridge pole. You just got to make sure you bury them deep enough that they're not going to fall over in the wind. So make sure you take the time to do that properly. Then once you have your ridge pole securely in place, you're going to start leaning supports against that ridge pole at a 45-degree angle. And I like these to be as close together as possible so that you have as much protection from the wind as you possibly can. So you're going to go out and you're going to find typically dead branches that are lying on the ground or that have died up against a tree, and start breaking those to the right length. What I like to do is test it out, break one to a certain length, see what kind of angle that leans at, and then I'll use that to measure the rest of the branches that I break to make sure they're all roughly the same length. Then once you have all of those stacked at a 45-degree angle against your ridge pole, from there, if you have time and you have the resources, you want to add insulation to that, because that alone is not waterproof. It'll help shed some of the water if it rains, but I mean, if you have a nasty storm, you're going to get wet. And it's also going to let some of the wind through. So as far as piling insulation on top, you can use dry grasses, you can use dry leaves, you can use spruce boughs. And the thicker the better. I typically say if you have the time and the resources, you want that to be several feet thick. And that's going to give you as close to a waterproof shelter as you can and give you some insulation and protection from the wind. In addition, don't ever forget about building a bed for yourself. And you can build a little platform to get you up off the ground, or you can just pile some of that dry grass or dry leaves or whatever it is you're using for insulation. But you want to make sure that it's thick enough that you get up off the ground, because the ground will suck heat out of your body, even in the summertime. It can make you really, really cold. So take the time to do that, and if you have the ability to build a fire, then that shelter at a 45-degree angle is going to reflect some of that heat back towards your body. But either way, with or without a fire, a simple lean-to is going to really help you get through the night. And I've used them several times on several different survival situations to help me stay warm. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you out to the site of my most recent survival challenge, and I've already deconstructed my lean-to, but I'm going to reconstruct it for you so you can see exactly what I'm talking about, and we can go from there. So I will take you on out there now. Okay, so I've chosen to build our lean-to underneath this old apple tree because the shape of the canopy gives us additional protection from the wind and from the rain, and we do expect some storms. Now, you can see I've got a ridge pole that I've rested in the crotch of two of these trees here. There's another small tree out here to the side. So that gives us a very strong support on this ridge pole. It's going to hold a lot of weight. It's not going anywhere. And then in addition to that, I've started to lean stronger materials at a 45-degree angle as support poles. So you can see on the right here, I found an old burnt out board, and I can use that, and that'll help us shed rain and also block the wind. On the left, I've just got some tree branches that I've leaned up against there that are plenty strong. And then to give us the additional protection that we need from the wind and rain, you can use leaves or dry grass or spruce boughs, anything that you can pile up real thick. You can see I've started to pile the dry grass there. You start at the bottom and you just kind of layer it up like roof shingles from the bottom up to the top. So I'll continue to put additional supports over here on the side, layer that grass all the way up to the top, and then on the other side underneath, you always want to make sure that you have a bed to keep you up off the ground. You want to be at least 4 inches up off the ground after everything is compacted. It could be, you know, a foot thick, but after you lay on it, if it's less than 4 inches, it's not going to keep you warm and dry. So in this case, we're just going to use more of the dry grasses to continue to pile that up and make a bed underneath it. I actually had this fully constructed as a shelter a few weeks ago for my springtime challenge, and we had incredible storms, and it made it through just fine. I stayed dry, and actually it stayed fully constructed until I came out here to break it down. So you can see with just a little bit of time and effort, you can make a shelter that can stick around and last through all kinds of weather. And it only took me initially about an hour to construct everything. So I'm going to go ahead and finish this up, and then I'll come back and show you what the finished product looks like. So you can see now I've got the whole thing reconstructed with, I'm going to say, probably 1.5 feet of dry grass on there for a roof, and that would work just fine to keep me dry and stay out of the wind. So there's our finished product, and again, this is Ryan Dotson with survivalsullivan.com. I appreciate you watching. Hope you've learned a little bit about building a lean-to shelter today. We'll catch you next time. Thanks.